On this episode of Shill's Gonna Shill, we have this from Collider. The one thing the Rings of Power does better than Peter Jackson's movies. Strap in, folks. We're in for a wild ride on this one. Collider is going to tell us what Rings of Power has done better than Peter Jackson with his iconic Lord of the Ring trilogies. And you know what? I love The Hobbit too. I know people didn't like it that much, though. I thought The Hobbit was fantastic. Not as good as Lord of the Rings, but I thought it was a damn good trilogy. So, before I reveal it, just take a few seconds. Guess, what do you think Rings of Power did better than Lord of the Rings? I'll give you 3 seconds on that one. The Orcs. They're saying that Rings of Power did the Orcs better than Lord of the Rings because they were more developed and we got to hear from them and see them more. That's like saying Disney Star Wars, although it was terrible, it did Stormtroopers better because we got to hear from Finn, a Stormtrooper. Does it matter? From the 6 movies that we've gotten of Lord of the Rings, I think the Orcs were pretty expanded on. We didn't need to know their entire everything. I didn't need to know about all their personalities and where their loyalties lie with certain. I didn't care about any of that stuff. I see these guys, I'm like, okay, these are the bad guys. These are the mindless grunt troopers, and that's it. That's it. I don't need to pretend that, oh yes, these orcs are all different and they all have their own sense of everything and they're unique. It's like, I don't give a shit. Never when I was watching Star Wars, I was thinking, man, that Stormtrooper, I need to know more about this man. Yep, this is the story that should be told. Get out of here. Rings of Power did nothing right. Even just from a show standpoint. Because my knowledge of Lord of the Rings is pretty simple. I've seen the trilogy, the original. I've seen The Hobbit. I played Shadow of War. That's essentially my entire knowledge of Lord of the Rings. But watching Rings of Power, because obviously they talk about that, Lord of the Rings purists have problems with this and things like that. From a TV show, let's pretend you've never watched the other movies before. The show's still bad. The show is really bad. The pacing's off. It's just slow and boring. The characters. How do you screw up Galadriel? How do you make Sauron? How do you make him better than her? That was what I was thinking while watching this TV show, if you could even call it a TV show. I'm like, you guys want me to root against this guy? The nicest guy on screen, the most heroic guy on screen, the kindest, most noble dude out there? This is the bad guy of the series? No, not even close. If you were to tell me, let's just strip Lord of the Rings from the entire title of this franchise of Rings of Power, would you be surprised if Galadriel turned out to be the bad guy in the end? That if the show was leading towards Galadriel becoming power mad like a Homelander or something like that, and she just goes off on the entire world, would that shock you at all? No, it wouldn't. Because they built her as a character like that, and again, if they went in that direction, I wouldn't be surprised, but of course they can't because it is tied to Lord of the Rings. This part here says, the Lord of the Rings of Power, has a lot going for it. The Orcs aren't Rings of Power's only success. The story may meander a bit. Can you imagine writing an article talking about the positives of this show, trying to shill for it, trying to get everyone that reads it to say, you know what, this show, yeah, it's getting terrible ratings and everyone I know hates it, but let this article tell me that maybe I should give it a shot. Second sentence here, the story may meander a bit. Does that sound like a positive ringing endorsement? Look at Lord of the Rings, the original. I'm going to use this word very, very loosely, okay? It's kind of boring in the beginning. You know why? Because they're building up the characters, you're learning the relationships, you're getting to know all these things. It's putting 1,000 breadcrumbs. Just sprinkle across just the first 20 minutes of it. We don't need action. Again, I use the word boring because I really can't think of what else to use with it. But yes, from a action standpoint of all of these things happening, I thought Frodo talking with Gandalf was a fun scene. I don't need to see Aragorn throwing torches and ring wraiths' fates the entire time in order for me to be entertained. It's a damn good movie. And sometimes the slow pacing just makes it better overall. The story may meander a bit before it dives into investment-worthy arcs. Scene 1, Galadriel's a jerk. Scene whatever the last episode is, Galadriel's still a jerk. This is investment-worthy arcs? No. And the worst part of this article is that it doesn't really even expand on the points that they're making. Right over here it says, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, succeeds with its orcs. First of all, no the hell it doesn't. Not even close. It says, by far, the most brightly shining high point of Rings of Power is the element of horror that the series creators brought to the project. I thought they were pretty terrifying in the original trilogy, too. And in The Hobbit, especially that dude that was surviving Legolas the entire time, he was pretty imposing. Here's a sentence that jumped out for me. It says, by large, the orcs of Jackson's films are relegated to grunt-like roles, while some key figureheads stand out and offer a more formidable threat to the protagonist. Okay, so most of the orcs in Lord of the Rings are mindless, linebackers with swords, while a few of them are the quarterbacks. Okay, that's fine. It talks about the scene how elves are chained up with the orcs running the slave camps and everything. So? And I would argue that there was a lot of character development with the orcs in the Two Towers. Remember there was an orc that was standing up for Merry and Pippin when the other orcs wanted to eat them and just their legs? He was like, no. These are all the captives of Saruman and that's what's going to happen to them? Yeah, that was kind of cool, right? So to say that, no, Lord of the Rings, the trilogies, didn't do orcs right, yet Rings of Power did? No. Not even close. I have no idea if Collider even watches these shows or how they even do it, because anyone that remotely watched this show and the trilogy could easily pinpoint which one did everything better. Rings of Power, by and large, removing the Lord of the Rings franchise tag from it entirely, is a failure of a show. It's bad all around, does nothing right, not interesting, the fight scenes are okay, the CGI is way too heavy on it. Rings of Power doesn't do a single solitary thing right in its own universe, let alone saying it did anything better than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. But in the end, what do you guys think about that?